Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Alton. I'm glad that you could join me. Yes, if you're a follower of this channel, I have been gone for a few weeks, but I promise you that I am back. I've just simply been either traveling for work or enjoying this beautiful weather up at the lake. And so I've taken a little bit of a break, but I'm going nowhere from the YouTube space anytime soon. Today I have for you a really neat watch by Imperial Watch Co. It's a company that I really didn't know a whole lot about. When Bob at Time to Go asked me if I'd like to check out this watch, I said absolutely. It is a really neat looking watch with some vintage vibes to it, and I think that a lot of you are really going to like it, and some of you are just going to hate it. It really is going to depend on how you appreciate the style of this watch. Certainly the execution is very well done, so that is not going to be the issue. It's going to come down to personal taste. Spoiler alert, I think it's really cool, and I wonder if you will as well. Let me know down in the comments at the end of the video, and let's get into it. This is the Imperial Watch Company Royal Guard 200. All right, let's take a closer look at the Royal Guard 200. Now, as far as I understand it, this was released late last year or the fall of last year, I believe. And this is a re-release with a special colorway before us, which is a little bit more cash. We'll talk about that in a second, but before we go any further, I want to look at dimensions. So they are calling this a 38mm watch, but I actually have it in at just under 38mm with a lug to lug just over 46. The lug opening is 20mm, and the thickness, even though it doesn't feel it, is actually 14mm thick. It has a nice size 7mm crown. The bracelet tapers down to 15.5mm and then back up to 17.5 for the buckle. All in all, I think you're going to find this to be a very well-sized watch for most people. Now, the really interesting thing that grabbed my attention right off the bat was the dial. It's got a lot of vintage cues to it, some Rolex cues for certain, but it also sort of adds it all up to its own thing. Those triangles at the cardinal points definitely stand out, but they're not just any old triangles. You'll notice that they're actually extremely well done with a double triangle at each cardinal marker. The same goes for the circles at the other hour indicators. The name of the watch, Royal Guard, is at the 6, and of course that logo there at the 12. And honestly, I like this logo a lot, and I don't mind the fact that it isn't straight, but of course your mileage may vary. The hands are well done and easy to distinguish from one another, of course, with that triangle on the minute hand. And I always appreciate a good lollipop hand, and this one is nice and long. You'll see it shadows the hour markers almost perfectly. Now, in order to have the vintage aesthetic on this watch, there is an aluminum bezel that is painted. This one has that kind of brownish off red color, which is quite neat. And this is actually a very special colorway. The crown is signed with a crown. And the case is simple, but very well done with drilled lugs there on the sides, which are nice, especially for strap changes. Screw down case back once again has the Imperial Watch Co. logo, and it looks pretty sharp. No quick release on this bracelet, but it is a pretty nice bracelet. I definitely like the way it wears. It's got a lot of articulation. You have negative end links, which I know people really appreciate. Some people may appreciate that there are polished outer lugs and brushed inner lugs. More of a satin really than a brushed. It's very nicely done. But of course, again, this is a situation where it is totally up to your preference. It does give it a little bit of bling, but of course it is going to get smudgy and it can scratch a little bit more easily. Now, one thing I don't love about this bracelet is that the end link itself does not reach to the end of the lugs. And I know for some people that doesn't bother them at all, but for me, this is a real pet peeve. I just like it when the end link reaches to the end of the lug. But I think what they've done is try to make this watch as wearable for as many small wrists as possible. And so this is the route they have taken with the negative lug and the smaller end link. As we already noted, the bracelet tapers down quite nicely, and it has the Imperial logo there on the buckle. As a push button release, everything is nicely milled. Plenty of micro adjusts for you, no adjusts on the fly. But of course, we're only seeing that in more expensive models these days for the most part, unless your name is San Martin. So let's talk about some of the specifications. It is 360L stainless steel, as you would expect, with a 38mm diameter and a 14mm thickness, 47 lug to lug and 20mm lugs for those straps, and we are going to try it on a few straps today. The hands are gilt pointer hands. They're custom made with Swiss vintage loom. They don't specify what kind of loom, but let's throw up a loom shot. You're going to see that this watch actually has some really nice loom, especially strong in the beginning. But against a couple of other notable divers, you're going to find that at around the 15-minute mark, it starts to fade a little bit more quickly than, let's say, the Seiko Monster to its left. It does have a sapphire crystal with a vintage dome to it, which is actually quite lovely, giving you lots of distortions as you read your watch from different angles. It does have air coating. I'm not sure how much, and honestly, it's been too rainy outside to really test it out. But under these studio lights, I think you can see that it holds up to scrutiny very well. So what are my picks and my nitpicks? Well, I guess my biggest nitpick for me is the fact that it has a screwed bracelet, and so I'm not able to size it. I just don't have a screwdriver that will fit into these holes, and it is sized up for Bob's wrist at time to go travel and wristwatches, and he's got about a 7.5-inch wrist, and mine's about an 8.5-inch, so I'm not actually able to try this on, but I am going to try this on some straps and show you what it looks like in a minute. It has a little bit of a QC issue with the hour hand. You can see it just maybe has a little bit of overspray, or I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that. But of course, if I purchased one with that issue, I would talk to the manufacturer, talk to Imperial Watch Co. and find out if I could have that fixed or replaced. As far as nitpicks, I really don't have any. I mean, it is a unique watch, so honestly, it's going to come down to style, but I myself really like it. I think it looks super cool. It's extremely legible. It's got a solid movement in it. It has a NH36 movement, which is a date movement. Now you'll notice that this does not have a date. And so you can actually order this with a date or without a date. If you get it with a date, it has hand-drawn numerals on it, which is really cool. And then it's in alternating color roulette style, black and red, which is really neat. I wish this was the date version so I could check it out. But of course, the no date offers a lot of symmetry and a lot of legibility. So I think that most people will appreciate it. The case is a little bit basic, but you know what? It works. It is 14 millimeters, but a lot of that is that dome crystal and a little bit of that case back, so the case isn't overly thick, and I like the taper of the bezel, the way it rises up towards the crystal from the case. The brushing on the lugs is a little bit on the rougher side compared to the satin finish on the bracelet. It would be nice if those matched a little bit better, but I think the brushing on the side is maybe done a little bit smoother. I like that there's drilled lugs. Always appreciate that. And I know screwed links are always nice if you have the proper screwdriver, and I can't seem to find one small enough in my collection for it. I like the nice big grippy crown. Even with my gloves on, I can easily manipulate it. Now, because it is an NH36, I'm going to pull it out one position. You'll see it keeps running because it just has the date wheel removed. Presumably there's a ghost date. There is a good pop to the crown. You can actually hear it, and it screws in really easily, which I think we can all appreciate, especially if you switch your watches out quite a bit, and you'll be unscrewing this and winding this every time you want to wear the watch. The bezel, nice and clicky, although with gloves on, you can see I struggle a little bit to move it. I think that's because of the way that it rises up from the case to meet the crystal. And everything lines up perfectly. So you sort of think that it's going to not line up, and then it springs back into place where it needs to be. So this is the Royal Guard by Imperial Watch Co. A really beautiful, well-sized, well-proportioned 200-meter dive watch with some vintage aesthetics. that I think you're going to really appreciate. Now, this is the limited edition tropical version, which was $500 and it has sold out. They also had a blue version that is $450 and it's sold out. And they had a limited edition ghosted green, which is sold out as well. However, if you act soon, there is still the classic black version, which is discounted to $439 US. And so if you want one of these, check it out ASAP, because it really is a neat watch. Or maybe stick around and see if they release any other colorways in the future, but I really don't know what their plans are. Now let's talk about value, because this is a little bit of money for a NH36 watch in a micro brand. You definitely can get better values on the market. But of course, we all know that watch collecting is not all about value. It's not all about specifications. This certainly has a lot of great specifications, and it's by no means outrageously priced. It does have a very small run of each colorway, and I think that's why they sell out. So you're definitely not going to see people wearing this watch on their wrists in public. The odds of that are pretty small. So I think when it comes down to it, the specs are all there. The aluminum bezel perhaps is the shortcoming on the specs, but that is very intentional for the style of this watch. So it really comes down to, do you like this watch? If you do, go ahead and grab yours today before they sell out. I will leave a link down in the description. I receive no royalties from this whatsoever. I just thought this was a really cool watch and I wanted to show you. So I want to thank Bob at Time to Go for arranging for me to see this watch. And I'd like to thank Imperial Watch Co. for sending it in. I'm going to pass it along to the next reviewer. And I want to thank all of you for watching. Have a great day.